Thank you, Mr. Sanimoto. My name is Akiko Abe of the Global Peacebuilding Association of Japan. Welcome to this seminar on Japan's international peace cooperation policies and activities. Today, we have nearly 30 people who have registered to join this seminar from all over the world. I'm currently outside of Japan, so I humbly request Professor Kumagai to act as a master of ceremony. Thank you, Professor Kumagai. Professor Kumagai, please.
Thank you, Abe-san, for distributing the announcement and sending Zoom link to all the participants. It's much appreciated. I hope the internet connection will be okay for stable and that you can be with us until the end of this seminar. Now I will explain to the participants of this seminar how we will conduct it for the next next hour and a half, excuse me. We have first Mr. Yasushi Akashi to make short opening remarks, and then Director General Kano to make a presentation, followed by Ambassador Abdel Latif of Egypt comment. A written summary of the meeting will be compiled by Mr. Maciej Witek, who is in Poland physically, but with us online. To help him, we will ask you later, all speakers, to submit. Summary record will be posted on the websites of GPAJ and KPC and ACUN's Tokyo office. The seminar is being recorded and will also be posted on the websites of the GPAJ, KPC, and ACUN's Tokyo office in accordance with our policy to disseminate widely our views and opinions. Before we start, let me remind everyone to kindly turn off or mute your microphones when you are not talking to avoid interruptions to our speakers. I now wish to request Mr. Akashi to make remarks. Mr. Yasushi Akashi, a representative of the Secretary General for Cambodia and the former Yugoslavia. Mr. Akashi, please.
Thank you very much. I'm honored and pleased to say just a few words at the beginning. I understand that the main subject matter for discussion today is Japan's international peace cooperation activities concerning the United Nations in particular. I am delighted that Director General, Mr. Kano of the International Peace Cooperation Headquarters Cabinet Office is, I understand, the main speaker with us tonight in Japan. I recall that the 31st years ago, this year, an important law was adopted by the Japanese Diet, our legislature, enabling our government to send a sizable self-defense force, civilian police, and UN volunteers, and some others, so as to make Japan to participate in the UN Transitional Authority in Cambodia. Japan joined other 40 UN member states in that. Subsequently, Japan has participated in a number of other UN and other bodies' activities in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the Western Hemisphere. We have good reason to be proud of what Japan has done in all these activities. Japan is also a new non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for the 12th time, which is a record, I understand, in the UN membership. Instead of deploring what the United Nations or the Security Council cannot do, let us try to think together what these global bodies might be enabled to do in the cause of international peace and security in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akashi. I now introduce and invite Mr. Kano Takehiro, Director General of the Secretariat of the International Peace Corporation Headquarters of the Prime Minister's Office, to make his presentation. Mr. Kano has served in various positions in Japan and abroad. Before he took up his current position, he was Director General for Southeast and Southwest Asian Affairs of Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2021 to 2022. His presentation is expected to last for around 25 to 30 minutes. Mr. Kano, please.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and particularly many thanks to Mr. Hasegawa, who gave me this opportunity, and also nice to see Mr. Akashi, a legendary figure in the history of Japan's International Peace Corporation. And good morning and afternoon and evening to the participants. I took up this position as the head of the International Peace Corporation headquarters. The body was set up 30 years ago in accordance with the Japan's peacekeeping operations. But even before I took this position last year, I had a chance to touch base with the various kinds of International Peace Corporation activities through various positions. Last year marks the 30th anniversary of the peacekeeping law, but compared with the 30 years ago and now, Japan as well as the international community has changed a lot. And I think that the Japan's International Peace Corporation is now at the crossroads. So right now, I'm trying to touch base with as many people as possible to think about the way forward. And I would like to get as many inputs as possible from the participants at today's meeting. Today, I would like to talk along the three main pillars. Firstly, I'd like to start by introducing myself, as well as the brief history of Japan's International Peace Corporations. I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs 1989, which is the year of the end of the Cold War. And as you may know, that the 1990, the Gulf crisis broke out. That was the watershed event for the Japan's International Peace Corporation. And since then, it has changed a lot. So my personal history largely overlaps with the history of the Japan's International Peace Corporations. So the what happened since then may be familiar to my generation or older generations, but may not be so for non-Japanese participants or younger generation. So I'd like to touch upon a couple of points. In this case, I will talk about the International Peace Corporation, not just the activities in accordance with the peacekeeping operation law, but also the some other related activities. Secondly, I'd like to touch upon the current status and challenges of the International Peace Corporations of Japan. And finally, thirdly, I'd like to share my thoughts on the possible future directions of Japan's International Peace Corporations. So, firstly, the brief overview of the history of Japan's International Peace Corporation. When I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1989, I was assigned at the then called United Nations Affairs Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which was a kind of predecessor bureau to now it's called the Foreign Policy Bureau. The reorganization took place after the Gulf crisis because of the some lessons learned from the Gulf War. Then the section I was assigned was in charge of the United Nations General Assembly or the Security Council and the peacekeeping operations. At that time, I had a chance to witness a couple of Japan's involvement in the international peace corporations, such as the sending the civilian officers to the UN missions in Iran in the aftermath of the Iran-Iraq war, or the sending observers to the referendum for the independence of Namibia. But dispatching the self-defense forces abroad was totally outside the scope of our imagination. And as you may know, that this year marks the end of the Cold War. And then after that, we have seen some sort of a movement of Cambodian peace process moving forward. And the Japanese government has started to contact with the government in Phnom Penh. And then within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there was an active discussion on the governance structure after the peace accord is made, and also the possible Japan's involvement. But that was the only 1 year I served in that division. And then I was sent abroad for the training as a trainee from the 1990 to 1993. And then from 1990 to 1993, as you know, that there are big events taking place in the international community, namely the Gulf crisis and Gulf War, and Japan's first ever dispatching the minesweeper vessels for minesweeping activities, and the passage of the peacekeeping operation law, and the participation in the ANTAC in accordance with PTO. All those took place in those 3 years. But just by chance, I didn't have a chance to serve as the officers because I was in the UK and studying in Cambridge, and no experience of getting those kind of works. If I had stayed in Tokyo in the UN Affairs Bureau, my life could have been much harder, because immediately after the Gulf crisis, the Japanese government tried to pass the law that would enable the dispatchment of the self-defense forces, but it didn't push through. It was in 1990. And then 2 years later, the Japanese government tried and then successfully passed the peacekeeping operation law. Anyway, only I had a chance to get to know those activities in Japan was through the media. I could read only one newspaper, Japanese newspaper, in the library of Cambridge. And then I sensed a huge gap, perception gap between Japan and the outside world. And then 1993, just before I get back to Japan, I heard a very tragic news in 1993 in Cambodia that Mr. Nakata and Mr. Takata, Mr. Nakata was the UN volunteer, and Mr. Takata was the civil police officer as part of the Japanese team assigned to ANTAC. I heard about that news just before getting back to Japan. And Mr. Nakata, by the way, is as old as mine, and it's very shocking news to me. And 2 years later, 1995, I just happened to serve as the country officer covering Southeast Asia for about 1 year and a half. And I had been involved in some sort of related to Cambodia. Already ANTAC left, but there's a very fragile political situation in Cambodia. So Japanese government tried to support Cambodia to conduct the next election on their own. And also economically, we hosted the consulting group meeting for Cambodia in 1996. And also we tried to help Cambodia join ASEAN as a new member. Anyway, then just by chance, again, I had a chance to get back to Cambodia last year, as my immediate previous position was a Director General for Southeast Asia and Southwest Asian Affairs, and accompanied Prime Minister Kishida's visit to Cambodia and Foreign Minister Hayashi's visit to ASEAN ministers meeting hosted by Cambodia. Current Cambodia, although it still has some shortcomings in political structure, but no doubt it benefited the peace dividend. 2 episodes I could share with you would be, one is the Prime Minister Hun Sen. Actually, he already served in that position for nearly 4 decades, but he told the Prime Minister Kishida that 30 years ago, Cambodia was a beneficiary of the PKO. and hosting the receiving UNTAC. But now it is Cambodia's turn to help the rest of the other parts of the international community by dispatching themselves to UNPKO. One episode is that Cambodia is now willing to help the international community by sending themselves the troops to PKO. I actually heard that they send troops to South Sudan. Or you may notice that Cambodia is supporting the Ukraine for getting landmine there. Another interesting episode would be that Cambodia is actually actively support the international efforts to support Cambodia, to support Ukraine by being a co-sponsor for the United Nations General Assembly resolution with regard to the Ukraine, which they changed the position from their position in 2014, when they abstained from the UN General Assembly resolution for Crimea issues. But unlike a couple of other global South countries, they actively support the UN efforts by being a co-sponsors for the resolution. Then in the year 2000s, the biggest watershed event would be 9/11 and its aftermath, the war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is what I experienced when I served in the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. And in the very morning of 9/11, I was actually flying from Washington, D.C. to Seattle to attend some meeting. But I got stuck because of the attack. And then I got back to Washington, D.C. by Amtrak. Then exactly 20 years ago, 2003, Iraq's war started, as you may recall. And then I was assigned to work on the post-war reconstruction assistance, particularly in terms of the coordinating with the U.S. government. And I touched base with the late Ambassador Katsuhiko Oku, who tragically lost his life in November 2003. Taking account of the lessons learned from the Gulf War, 10 years before, the Japanese government has taken various measures, including sending the self-defense forces vessels for refueling mission in Indian Ocean, as well as sending the ground self-defense forces to southern Iraq for reconstruction activities by passing the special measurement law with some certain time limits. That special measurement legal measures was based upon the another legislation which Japan has passed in late 1990s in the context of strengthening a US-Japan alliance. And that US-Japan alliance is what I was in charge of in late 1990s. So that experience had led to very quick legislative measures in the aftermath of 9/11. In accordance, as in parallel with those self-defense forces activities, Japan has taken various ODA support to Afghanistan as well as Iraq. So those are the two wheels of the vehicle that Japan promoted peace cooperation, I could say. So all in all, the 2 decades in the aftermath of the Cold War, from early 1990s up to 2000s, the Japanese international peace cooperation has expanded a lot in accordance with peacekeeping operation law or some specific laws, as I mentioned, in the context of Afghanistan and Iraq. In this period, Japan sent self-defense forces in accordance with the PKO to various parts of the world, including the Golan Heights, Timor-Leste, Mozambique, and Rwanda. And in a legal framework, we step-by-step basis relax the rule of engagement of the arms to be carried by self-defense forces servicemen. And in addition to that, from 2009, we sent the self-defense forces, naval self-defense forces to Gulf of Aden and off the coast of Somalia for the anti-piracy activities. And that activities continue up until now. So we have, in a sense, a permanent sort of presence of self-defense forces abroad in Middle East and the Indian Ocean, which was totally unthinkable 30 years ago. I could point out a couple of factors that enable this self-defense, that enable the International Peace Corporation of Japan in those 2 decades. One is the international community is relatively stable. There was not much big power rivalries, and that allowed the activation of the UN Security Council. And largely there was the confidence and euphoria in multilateralism. And secondly, the security situation surrounding Japan was relatively stable, I would say relatively. Of course, there was some issue of North Korea and also some Chinese activities in South China Sea or East China Sea. East China Sea, as the Senkaku issues are already there. But in those periods, the Senkaku issues is basically the issue of the activists or officials, not the official vessels. So it's a relatively stable compared to the current one. Thirdly, the Japanese economy still maintains some sort of a big presence and strengths. Throughout the 1990s, Japan was the top donor in terms of the ODA. And up to 2010, Japan still was the second largest economic power in terms of the nominal GDP. So there was a general willingness on the part of the Japanese public, to be more actively engaged in the international community, not just with the economic cooperation, but with other needs. And there was a growing consensus of the overseas activities of self-defense forces. So based upon those achievements, we have seen a comprehensive overhaul of the legal framework related to Japan's national security, which was done under the late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo in 2015. And that includes various legislative changes, big changes. Some of them have some sort of issues related to the reinterpretation of the Japanese constitution, such as the allowing the partial sort of allowing of the collective self-defense right, and some other issues. But it also included the International Peace Corporation activities, namely the even more relaxing of the rule of engagement of the arms to be carried by self-defense forces. I was involved in those processes as the director in charge from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it was some big breakthrough in terms of the legal framework. But ironically, after that, from the year 2000, Japan's International Peace Corporation is a bit stagnant, I have to say. So that moved me to the second pillar. The currently we have just 2 missions in accordance with the peacekeeping operations. One is the sending a couple of, actually 4 staff officers to the AMIS, United Nations in South Sudan. Another one is the two staff officers dispatched to the MFO, Multilateral Force and Observers, which is in Sinai Peninsula, which is not a UN, but a non-UN type of the peace operations. And last year, as a one-time operations, immediately after the Ukrainian situations, we sent the air self-defense forces to be carrying out the transport of the humanitarian goods of the UNHCR and Japan's own humanitarian goods to the surrounding countries of Ukraine to be dispatched to be distributed to people of Ukraine. And then, but right now, because of the after the invasion by Russia in Ukraine, it is getting even more difficult for members of the Security Council of the United Nations to get the consensus on the peace cooperations. So, and also for other reasons, in Japan, there is not much momentum to resume sending troops to the UN missions. Of course, if you take international peace cooperation in wider sense, we do continue some activities. One is the, as I mentioned, the anti-piracy activities or information or intelligence gathering activities in Middle East. That's one thing. And also, although this is not the self-defense forces involved activities, but we have a long history of supporting the Mindanao peace process in the Philippines. I was involved in this process when I served in Manila a couple of years ago. And right now, the Philippine government and the Islamist group called the MILF have reached agreement, and the Philippine government passed the law a couple of years ago that would grant the much wider autonomous power to MILF. And now, although it was supposed to be completed last year, in line with the nationwide election, but due to COVID, it is delayed by 3 years. But all in all, it is on track. And then for the Japanese side, we dispatch a retired self-defense officer to the international framework called the Independent Decommissioning Body, which is in charge of monitoring the DDR activities of MILF. But the current situation of international peace cooperation activities of Japan is not very large. Not to mention the compared with the big troop contributing countries such as in Asia or Africa, but also the European countries or Australia, which are diminishing troop deployment. Why this change? I would say a couple of factors. One is the much more apparent of the rivalries between big powers. Particularly Russia and China are getting even more aggressive through 2010s and current decade. As you may recall, China started sending the offshore vessels, not the activists or official boats anymore, but rather offshore vessels in large numbers in the territorial waters surrounding Senkaku from 2012. And also the South China Sea, there are the so-called Scarborough Shoal issues between the Philippines and China. That took place 2012. And 2014, Crimea was snatched by Russia from Ukraine. So the latest document, Japan's national security strategy, described Russia and China both as a threat or a challenge. That is in big contrast with the previous decades, 1990s or 2000s. There was at that time, there was some sort of international cooperation, coordination, including China and Russia. But that's no longer the case right now. Secondly, the security situation surrounding Japan, that's getting even more severe and difficult. And 2010 was the year China overtook Japan in terms of nominal GDP. And now that size is more than 3 times as Japan's. And defense budget size is even more bigger than Japanese one. And that affected the security situations, North Korea, East China Sea, and South China Sea. And then Japan is exposed to 3 difficult countries, North Korea, China, and Russia. And Southeast Asia is a traditional area of concern for Japan, thanks to the successful sort of international peace cooperation and also their own economic development. Cambodia or Timor-Leste, those are the two big successful stories. But ironically, that could lead to the decrease in demand for those international peace cooperation in those regions. Of course, there is an exception. Exception is Myanmar after the coup d'etat from February 2021. But that country is not currently in a situation that the international community could consider any sort of tangible sort of actions, collective actions to Myanmar. And thirdly, the sentiment or the thinking of Japanese people vis-a-vis international peace corporations. Their attention is much more focused, quite understandably, the immediate the concerns of issues that are directly linked to the Japan's own national security. So there's not much attention anymore to the international peace corporations. And actually, with a hindsight, alliance management is always a driving force, even in 1990s or 2000s. You remember the immediately after the Gulf crisis or war in 1990s or Afghan or Iraq war in the 2000s. Of course, it is a part of the international efforts to restore peace. But alliance management was a big driving force even then. So to put in straightforward, whether one of the big criteria for Japan's judgment whether we should participate in the international peace cooperation or not would be one is whether that region is important for Japan or not, such as the Southeast Asia or Asia. Any region is much closer to Japan. Or another criteria would be whether the countries like US or Europe or G7 would show interests. So Ukraine applies to the second criteria. So as part of the alliance management or the solidarity among the G7, we do some cooperation economically, also the peacekeeping operations, limited peacekeeping operations last year. But that not be the case in Middle East or Africa. And so there is of course, there is a demand for the peacekeeping operations, and also the UN run the couple of missions there. But it is quite difficult to convince the Japanese public to send the troops in large numbers to such areas. So that is challenges that we face in conducting the international peace cooperation activities. So how we could move forward? That is a question I face, and that moved me to the third pillar, possible future directions. Let me tackle this issue from three aspects. One is the conceptual one. Another one is the more tangible, concrete measures. Conceptually, I would like to treat international peace cooperation and Japan's national security as one, not putting those two as a kind of trade-off relationship. In Japanese, international peace cooperation tend to be taken as somewhat kind of charitable activities. The activities that we could do only when we can afford, but not necessarily the indispensable. I don't think that that should be the case. I rather think that the international peacekeeping operations or international peace cooperation should be an integral part of the activities that could help contribute to Japan's own national security, together with the cooperation and the alliance or quasi-alliance. So, namely, the cooperation under the umbrella of alliance or quasi-alliance and as well as the cooperation under the UN. That would involve the coordination with the Global South countries. That two activities should go hand in hand, and that would contribute to the national security. That's kind of a conceptual framework that I would like to promote. Actually, the Ukrainian situation since last February gives us the opportunity to recognize the importance of the rule of law or rule-based international order. So the Japanese government, after the breakout of the war, we say that what's happening in Ukraine could be happening Asia tomorrow, or we cannot tolerate any sort of a change of unilateral change of the status quo by force, wherever, not just in Asia, not just in Indo-Pacific, but also wherever in the world. And then based upon that position, we took various positions, including the sanctions to Russia or support to Ukraine, and not just a solidarity among G7, but also reaching out to the wider community, international community, including Global South countries. So in that context, international peace cooperation is an important endeavor to restore and strengthen the rule-based international order. So again, we should not choose between alliance and UN, but rather we should strengthen both. So I think it's very important and appropriate for Minister Hayashi or Minister of Foreign Affairs attend this month the UN Security Council mission in New York, and he also met with his counterparts of the US as a 2+2 in Washington, D.C. So I think that shows that Japan attaches the importance to both alliance and the UN. One of the perspectives I think that should be important in promoting the international peace cooperation today would be the cooperation with the so-called Global South countries. I think that the position of the so-called Global South countries getting attention right now in Japan, particularly after their actions to the Ukraine-Russia war. Not all countries actually have taken the same position as G7 or Japan, but their position is also not the same as Russia or China. And sometimes they play a critical role in supporting the multilateral framework. Remember that when the G20 summit was held in Indonesia last year, the chair country Indonesia and incoming chair India managed to get the agreed document, including Russia and China, as well as the G7 countries, getting through.
You have 5 more minutes.
That shows that they could play even more bigger role in the international community. And by the way, those two countries are expected to excel Japan in terms of the size of the economy by mid-century. Those countries have the long tradition of non-aligned movement. So alliance or quasi-alliance cannot be a pillar of the security cooperation with those countries. India is a typical case. I think that would be the UN. That would provide the source of legitimacy, and that could be a good pillar for cooperation. That applies to the other areas in the UN, such as development assistance or environment or disarmament and non-proliferation. But PKO, they attach a great sense of attachment. Already, the big troop contributing countries are occupied by Asia and Africa, as you know. India, their history is double that of Japan. They are more than 70 years. And in total, they have dispatched 250,000 and then they have lost their precious lives, more than 180. But still, they send thousands of people to 9 UN missions. They accumulate huge knowledge and experiences. Likewise, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, they are all major troop contributing countries. And in East Asia, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Vietnam, starting to dispatch their troops to UN missions in Sudan or South Sudan. And Thai engineers took over the place from Japanese troops in South Sudan. And as I said, that Cambodia is dispatching the military police to South Sudan. So I think that in order to ensure the rule-based international order, the cooperation with those global South countries is critical. Of course, I don't think that Japan can do and should do in the same manner as those large-scale troop contributing countries. Rather than that, we could share the comparative advantage with each other, and then together with them, we could jointly support international peace cooperation activities. And recent years, as you may know, that we are supporting the peacekeeping centers operated in those countries through various means, like improvement of the facilities or dispatching the lecturers. And also under the framework of the UN TPP, a Trilateral Partnership Program, we are supporting the capacity building support to countries like Kenya or Indonesia. Maybe on top of that, we could consider some sort of equipment type of support to those countries. And actually, I know that the UN is interested in facilitating that kind of matching between the troop contributing countries and the countries that could consider equipment contribution. So PKO could be a good entry point for the policy consultation, and then various kind of security cooperation between Japan and those global South countries. And that could expand the scope of Japan's foreign policy and security policy, and also the contributing to the possibly the defense industry of Japan. In 2014, we have now the 3 principles of the defense equipment transfer, and a couple of projects is ongoing, but mostly it's focused on the Japan security, some sort of joint development with the European as well as the US countries. But if you look at the 3 principles of those of the defense equipment transfer, it also touches upon the certain cases. If it helps active promotion of peace and contribution and international cooperation, we could transfer defense equipment. We could transfer defense equipment to those countries. So I think that even under the current principles, we could explore the equipment cooperation in peacekeeping operations. Maybe I think I'm already running short of the time allowed to me, but right now, let me conclude. If you look around the world, unfortunately, we are now in a situation of the security deficit, namely that there are various challenges. And so the demand is getting high for the security cooperation, but the providers, the capacity to provide the security is getting thin. So we are now no longer in the so-called post-Cold War period, where the globalization is moving, and then we have a confidence in the multilateralism and enjoying the peace and prosperity. That could be no longer the case. But still, we could work together in an innovative and creative manner to restore and strengthen the rule-based international order. So Japan, on our part, we could strengthen the diplomatic initiatives through various means. And so one possible way forward would be the cooperation and collaboration with the newly emerging security provider, mainly from the global South countries under the framework of the UN, together with the security cooperation with the alliance. So I think that those two pillars should go hand in hand. And then on our part, International Peace Corporation, I think we could do a lot in supporting the rule-based international order. Maybe I should stop, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kano, for your comprehensive presentation. I again apologize for the audio problems and the interruption. Now I'd like to ask Ms. Benita Sopaj to introduce the commentator, Ambassador Mohad Abdel-Latif.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kumagai. My name is Arbinita Sopa, and I'm External Relations Officer of GPAJ, KPC, and ACON's Tokyo Liaison Office. I would like to provide you with a brief summary of the historical background of Ambassador Abdel-Latif. Ambassador Abdel-Latif has been the Director General of the Cairo Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping, and Peace Building since 11 of October 2020. Prior to his position, he served as the permanent observer of the International Renewable Energy Agency to the United Nations from 2017 to 2019. From 2000 to 2004, he served as the permanent mission of Egypt to the United Nations and the World Trade Organization in Geneva, where he worked on disarmament, trade, health, and intellectual property issues. He also worked at the office of the spokesman of the Prime Minister from 2005 to 2006. Ambassador Ahmed Abdel-Latif has been engaged in academic work, including a research fellowship at Harvard University John F. Kennedy School of Government in 2012. From 2014 to 2015, he was the representative of research and independent non-governmental organizations to the Advisory Board of the Climate Technology Center and Network under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Ambassador Latif to provide your comments in 8 to 10 minutes due to the time limitations. Ambassador Abdel-Latif, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to take part in this very interesting and timely meeting. And let me start by thanking Professor Hasegawa for the kind invitation and recognize him as also a member of our center's International Advisory Board. But also I really would like to pay tribute to himself and Mr. Akashi, our elders, our distinguished elders in this meeting for the services they have made, not only to Japan, but to the international community at large in the very important responsibilities they have had in the area of peacekeeping. And I'm also happy also to have this, to share the speaking roles with Mr. Kano, the head of the International Peace Corporation Secretariat at the Office of the Prime Minister, who had the pleasure of meeting in person a couple of months ago in New Delhi, and also just greetings from Cairo to all the distinguished participants in this meeting. As you kindly said, I'm the head of a peacekeeping training center based in Cairo, CCCPA, the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building. Maybe just a few words about it to familiarize our distinguished participants. This is a center that was established in 1994 by the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for training and capacity building on peacekeeping, originally with a focus on Africa, but it has expanded with the years to include a strong focus also on peace building and conflict resolution, also not just in Africa, but beyond. We also have a regional and international role. We are at the international level, the secretariat of an important association called the IAPTC, the International Association of Peacekeeping Training Center. We were the past president of that association, and we are the current secretariat, and our secretariat role was just extended a couple of months ago to a second mandate in 2027. We are also an African Union Center of Excellence on Peace and Security, and the only civilian peacekeeping training center in the Arab world. So we work also with Arab countries. I've been listening very carefully to the very important overview and introductory remarks and overview that was provided by Mr. Kano, and I would like to maybe just from the perspective of an institution that has worked for a long time with Japan, who has had Japan as a long-standing partner for many years, maybe a few comments on a few areas. What should be the priorities of Japan in terms of international peace cooperation? Bearing also in mind, of course, that I come from a country, Egypt, that shares a lot of priorities and principles with Japan regarding the importance of rule-based international order, multilateralism, and strengthening collective peace and security, particularly working through the United Nations and regional organizations. So also that is a very important foundation of our work that is also reflected in everything we do and also in our partnership. So I will make around 4 points on priorities that I think are important from the region we come from, the world, from our work regarding priorities of Japan international peace cooperation. First, in terms of geographic priority, in terms of geographic scope, I think it is very important that Japan continues to be actively engaged in Africa and with Africa on issues relating to peace and security. As we have seen with the Ukraine conflict, Africa is is at the center stage, back at the center stage of geopolitical competition, and the issues and challenges of peace and security in Africa are particularly acute and require urgent attention. We can see this particularly in the Sahel region, where we see terrorism as #1 security threat to many African countries, leading to destabilization, to possibly state collapse of some countries, but also in the Horn of Africa, in areas that are important also for Japan's national security. And we recently, just to mention, we recently had a very interesting seminar with the Japanese embassy in Cairo on peace and security in the Red Sea region, and where it was pointed out the important connection between Red Sea security and security in the Indo-Pacific region that is very important to Japan. And some of the Egyptian participants in this seminar called for Japan to be more actively engaged, for example, on support to conflict resolution and achieving peace in the region. If we see conflicts like in Somalia, like in Yemen, these are very serious threats to peace and security in this region that require active international engagement. And so continued priority on Africa. And from that perspective, we welcome very much the convening of TICAD 8 in Tunis, the Tokyo International Conference for African Development, which was held in Tunis last August. The Tunis Declaration, very important, that sends a very positive signal of continued engagement of Japan with the peace and security and economic challenges of the continent. So I would like to emphasize that at the outset. And engagement with the continent also means also supporting the African continent in its representation in peace and security and international cooperation bodies, in particular the Security Council. And just to mention from that perspective, the Tunis Declaration stated full support to address the historical injustice of lack of sufficient African representation on the Security Council, but also to mention the G20. Only one African country is a member of the G20, which is an important global body for international cooperation. So that was my first point, the centrality of Africa and the African challenge on peace and security, including directly connecting to the peace and security of Japan. And I actually fully agree with Mr. Kano said, and this is something that Egypt also believes, that its international peace and cooperation is an integral part of its national security. Egypt is a top troop contributing country to UN peacekeeping. It is the 6th largest contributor. Most of the peacekeeping training Most of the peacekeeping missions are in Africa, actually, and Egypt's contribution to these peacekeeping missions is entirely in Africa, because our national security is also linked to that part of the world. And we believe that we can advance that working closely with partners. So this brings me now to the second point about, if we have talking about the geographic focus, the importance of continued engagement and focus on African peace and security. My second point is on the more thematic and substantive areas of focus of Japan peace and international cooperation, which brings me to the very important issue of building institutions, nationally owned efforts for advancing peace and security through, in particular, capacity building and training. As the Cairo Center, I would like to pay tribute and to express our gratitude and appreciation for all the support and very important partnership with Japan over more than 12, 14 years in contributing to training and capacity building of Egyptian peacekeepers, of African peacekeepers on issues relating peace and security. This partnership of Japan with African Peacekeeping Training Center has been fundamental importance in strengthening the ability of African countries also to be more strongly engaged on issues of peace and security, of peacekeeping. So we also highlight the importance of continued this cooperation through long-term partnership with institutions such as the Cairo Center, other centers, the African Union. These are very critical blocks that are key to maintaining the capacity of African countries to really also be actively engaged on issues of peace and security. And this also reflects Japan's, I think, important approach that we appreciate very much about supporting national ownership, nationally led efforts, working with equal partnership. And this is also a very important characteristic that we appreciate in the partnership with Japan, the equal partnership in advancing issues of peace and security. And I think that we are at a very critical time for peacekeeping. Peacekeeping is under a lot of criticism in terms of its effectiveness. We can see this in the Sahel. We can see this in Democratic Republic of Congo. So more than ever before, we need that countries who are supportive of international peace and security, like peacekeeping, to come together, to work together more strongly, because we are at a very critical time, and partnerships between these countries is extremely important at this time. And I think that we will have also a peacekeeping ministerial this year in Accra, which will be an important moment to highlight and reaffirm this this important collaboration. Now, I've heard about what have been said that about issues and challenges regarding sending troops to peacekeeping missions. But what I would highlight and what we would welcome is actually maybe if troops is more challenging, but instructors, Japanese. I think we would welcome working more closely with Japanese experts in peacekeeping, instructors for training and capacity building that would come to Egypt, that we would go together in parts of Africa where we can work together on the ground, on strengthening capacities of African countries on peacekeeping. I think this is be an example of triangular cooperation that could be very successful, building also on the already partnership we have in terms of support. These mobile, this could be also take the shape of mobile teams made of, for example, Japanese and Egyptian experts and African experts working together on the ground, for training, for capacity building. That is something that we think that could be a kind of a realistic way to scale up Japan engagement on peacekeeping, and also building and expanding the models of trilateral cooperation. You mentioned Kenya and Indonesia. I think there is scope. We would welcome also the scope to do more of such triangular cooperation models with Japan, and we think that there is a lot of potential for that, things are becoming also more specialized in terms of training, the use of digital technologies, innovation, which is Japan also is very advanced in. We have not mentioned this, but this is one of the strengths of Japan: the use of technology, the use of innovation, and this is something that we also very much need. Third issue, also it's a substantive issue, and I would like to highlight it very much because this is an area I think we're also there's a lot of common let's say views between Japan and Egypt on this issue, which is the link between the contribution of peacekeeping to peace building. We recognize the limitations of traditional, let's say, peacekeeping, and we need to strengthen the contribution that the peacekeeping makes to peace building, because we think that peace building really is the cornerstone or efforts to advance sustaining peace approach, addressing the root causes of conflict, advancing post-conflict reconstruction and development. And let me mention in that regard that Egypt is now hosting the African Union Center for Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development. So there's scope also to work with that center and with our center on these issues, advancing women, peace and security, advancing human security. I think all these are fundamental issues that require also scaling up. I was very happy to see that last Thursday, Japan Security Council held a debate on investing in people, investing in resilience for peace and security, where these issues that I'm mentioning were really highlighted. The issue of the nexus between humanitarian development, peace issues. We recognize it's important. There is a greater potential to work together, to collaborate together on advancing this. And I think there is a lot of common ground to do that, involving also development agencies on the Japanese side, peace building association, and doing that through our various tools and forms of engagement. One of them, we as the Cairo Center, we also are the secretariat of the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development, of which Japan is also a partner. And this is a forum that precisely seeks to advance peace building action in coordination with peacekeeping, particularly on the African continent. When Mr. Kano spoke, I did not hear him mention climate change and the challenges that climate change brings to peace and security. And I think they are growing. Famines, droughts, floods, their scale is massively increasing in different parts of the world. And again, that is something that I think we need to take on board when thinking about the future of peace cooperation. And again, Japan with its technology, early warning capacities can make an important contribution to that, whether it's in peacekeeping missions and peace building efforts. And just to mention that we, as Egypt, we hosted COP27, the Sharm el-Sheikh, the climate COP in Sharm el-Sheikh last November, and we launched an initiative called Climate Responses for Sustaining Peace, where we want to make climate and peace work better together. And this is a very interesting initiative that we will implement this year, and maybe also there is scope to also further work on that issue with Japan. Finally, I want to stress on the maybe just as a conclusion on the issue of partnerships. We live in an area of increasingly limited resources, limited also abilities. No one alone can confront the challenges of peace and security we are witnessing today. So the partnerships are even more important than ever, and in particular partnership between countries who share the same principles, as I mentioned at the beginning, who share the same objectives, who can leverage their respective strengths to work together, whether in terms of their regional positioning, their capacities, their areas of strength, of resources. And I think this is the way to go for advancing peace and security. And I think these partnerships will be more and more critical on issues on equipment was also mentioned as an area where this can be taken forward, but also, as I mentioned, training, expertise. And as again, just to conclude by again expressing our deep appreciation for the partnership with the government and people of Japan over the past 14 years. It has been very key to our ability to deliver on our work on training and capacity building on peace and security in Africa. And we look forward to continue building and expanding that partnership along some of the issues that have been mentioned. And again, I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity to make these remarks. And I appreciate also very much learning from already much of what has been said. I hope I was not too long, and I thank you again very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Latif. Now I'd like to request Professor Hasegawa to start and moderate the discussion and make a concluding remark. Professor Hasegawa, please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for the two speakers. I will now open the floor and have an active discussion with the participants. Before I tend to ask Ambassador Shinyo and Yamamoto Sensei and so forth, anyone else who wants to jump in first? If not, okay, Ambassador Shinyo, would you like to hit first, please?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Hasegawa, and thank you very much, of course, Mr. Kano and also Ambassador Ahmed for your very detailed and wonderful presentation. And it was very much well received. And there is no big differences between the two. I think what Japan is doing and try to do or has been doing was very well received by the the country of the Global South in terms of the capacity building or TPP, those kind of things. And I think that is, of course, the strength of the Japanese, the government, because they have lots of the huge amount of the experiences in terms of the how to manage, how to operate the engineering battalion, and how to give more knowledge about the using of the machines and AI or IT or whatever. So I think this is the right direction. We should not shy away. We should not be so much hesitating that we are not that we haven't dispatched troops for a couple of years. I think this is the time for Japan to nurture its ability and think further ahead. In that sense, I would like to propose a couple of things. The first of all, I think it is very important for countries like Japan to propose and to work more for the purpose of the peacemaking. Of course, peacekeeping and peace building is very important, but I think the prerequisite for peacemaking and peacekeeping and peace building is peacemaking, to have the peaceful resolution of the conflicts. If we don't have that kind of process, we are not able to send any peacekeeping operations, nor the moving towards the peace building. And I think it is very much criticized that there is no peace to keep, particularly those peacekeeping operations in Africa nowadays. I think South Sudan and so on and so forth. It is so difficult to preserve peace, and also within the framework of the peacekeeping operation. That's the reason why they have to have the robust peacekeeping operation under Chapter 7. And that is something that we have to reconsider. And so that from today, from now on, I think what we have to do is to put more emphasis on how to make the conflict peacefully resolved. And this is the diplomatic efforts. And that is very necessary. And that is also the point which was pointed out by the Hippo report, the primacy of the politics or primacy of the political solution. And that is something that we have to do more. So my suggestion is that the Japanese government, together with the other countries, to follow that path. We have a very good chance because Japan is for the 12th time the non-permanent member of the Security Council, and also the president, chairman of the G7 this year. So I think we are in a very, very, better situation, good situation to do that. For example, Ukraine. Well, maybe I think 1 year, I don't know, or 1.5 years, we would be able to have some kind of the peace resolution or the ceasefire at least. And this is the time, of course, for Japan and other countries to think about the deployment of the peacekeeping operations under the framework of the UN or under the framework of regional organizations. So I think we have to work very hard in that direction. Or we can also think of the preventive deployment of peacekeeping. We have already had that kind of the peacekeeping operation in Macedonia. That was UNPREDEP, very famous one. So I think we should also, think about the preventive deployment of the peacekeeping before conflict occurs. And one or two concrete points that I would like to share with you is that I think we should perhaps work very hard together how to give the accurate information. So the cooperation in the field of information is very important because we have already seen, in the Ukrainian war or in other wars, that the fake news, disinformation, or infodemics that are prevailing. Those kind of things are prevailing. And I think we should also, work together with the other countries in terms of the, peacekeeping operations, or as a new mandate for the new, peacekeeping operations to control that information or to cope with the fake news or infodemics. For that purpose, I think we're able to use, the technologies and AI and so on, so forth. In the case of the Cambodian UNTAC, there was also such kind of the efforts that has been done by UNTAC under the auspices of Mr. Akashi, and that was the UNTAC radio, UNTAC broadcasting. The UNTAC was in charge of the giving right and proper and authentic news or information to the people for the purpose of the election and so on and so forth. So I think it is also very important for peacekeeping operations to think about the how to give accurate informations, authentic informations without any fake news and so on. Finally, I would like to also think of the the very brand new type of the peacekeeping operation, which preserves culture or cultural heritage. We are very much worried about the cultural heritages, cultural assets. Historical one would be broken down in the in the wars, Ukraine, for example, and how we are able to stop that. Maybe I think we should we can also think about the somehow deploying a peacekeeping operation for preserving not only the people, civilians, but also the culture or historic, sites and so on and so forth. So I think the that kind of the protection of the world heritage, cultural heritage, is also becoming very important. And that is not only confined to Ukraine, but also in African countries. There are also a great historical monument and also the cultural monument that is so easily broken and damaged. That should be prevented. So those kind of things could be perhaps work out and also could be incorporated as a new works and new task of the peacekeeping operations doctrine. I think that kind of thing is also very much necessary to be worked out. Well, this could be perhaps, very well done by Japan and other countries. Sorry for my
Excellent.
length of my
Okay.
speech. But,
Good.
Thank you.
Four points that Ambassador Shinyo made. Okie doke. Yes, Mr. Mizuno, you raised the hand. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make some comment and also proposal to what the director.
May I ask now everybody to keep it in 3 minutes, and I will go like this.
Yes. I think what the director said is, if I may summarize, power creates interest. So in case of Japan, as a declining economic power, we have to find out, we have to redefine our national interest in contributing international peace activities like UNPK and ODAs. So my impression is we have a kind of a ad hoc approach, like putting self-defense forces on the Djibouti for the anti-piracy activities. And we also dispatch self-defense forces to South Sudan in order to UN peacekeeping. And also we dispatch self-defense forces to Sinai Peninsula for multinational forces. Each operation has its significance, as the director said. But in order to appeal to Japanese audience for domestic political support, we need a kind of a package approach. And also, I think to contribute international peace activities, there are different purposes like anti-terrorism, anti-piracy, also safety of the sea lane, vital sea lanes, and also humanitarian assistance for displaced and forced migrations. So in this sense, if we have a kind of tools and we scatter them. So I think a director, I really would like to appreciate the director's comprehensive overview. We need to make a kind of a packaged and a conceptual package framework to redefine our national interest in contribution in especially this Indo-Pacific region, Horn and Africa, and including ambassadors mentions areas of the Middle East. That is my
that's
comment.
interesting.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Need for the conceptually packaged approach. Okay. Before I ask the speakers to respond. Okay, let's have one more. Ambassador Yamamoto, please. Yeah, 3 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentations, and I really appreciated them both. And I fully followed, probably, the thinking that particularly Mr. Kano had outlined in terms of the difficulties in trying to find areas where Japan could effectively contribute. And I want to sort of say maybe 3 things, maybe 4. First of all, I think there is a gap that I think we should fill. Meaning, when we say we, meaning Japan and other non-power, non-great power countries, the Ukraine and other sort of big power rivalries, of course, at the moment, perhaps the most severe concerns of these big powers. But as Mr. Latif had mentioned, there are many conflicts which need to be addressed. And when the great powers are consumed in dealing with those special issues, it should be like countries like Japan, Egypt, and the others who are the sort of leaders in their respective regions and field, who should really take much more initiative in trying to address those issues. And there has to be a systematic way of doing that. One of the possibilities, and I say that it's a possibility, is to utilize the Peace Building Commission, for instance. The Peace Building Commission has always addressed African issues effectively. Yeah, even though the Security Council didn't really take them too seriously. And there is a rivalry between Peace Building Commission and Security Council, which actually make it a little bit difficult for the Peacebuilding Commission to be as effective, because the representations usually tend to be lower at the First Security Council levels. But they have the capacity. There have been concrete achievements. And I think we, the countries of the middle powers, if you like, should take the lead when the great powers cannot take lead in addressing issues in Africa and other places. The second thing I would say is for Japan, I think it is very important, as I think Ambassador Latif had mentioned, to think about cooperation, coordination, partnership. I think that, you know, when we talk about peace operations or peacekeeping, if we try to do everything within our own capacity and legal limitations, there are constraints. But when we look at what we can do together by working in partnership with the countries like Egypt or Bangladesh or India, Nigeria, you know, the horizons will expand greatly. And I think the couple of things in terms of you know, the training of people, but also the what is now being proposed in terms of equipment provision can also be part of this. But of course, it could even extend further to talk about the policy issues. And coupled with what I've mentioned as the first proposal, we could do much more. The third thing is really to list the comparative advantage of Japan, which is, I think, in line with what I think Professor Mizuno had said. You know, Japan can provide many things which the peace operations need. For instance, when I was actually in charge of Afghanistan, I need vehicles. I needed computers. Of course, I had them, but they were not of the top class because our budget is limited, and then we had to be content with the sort of second-class stuff in some cases. And Japan is known to be have comparative advantage in vehicles. So if that is possible, I know it means a lot of money, but this, if Japan said that, okay, we'll be the first in among the countries to provide vehicles for the UN peace operations, and we can even utilize second-hand vehicles so long as they are well certified, and I mean the maintained and certified. So to list those things, this is just an example, to list the comparative advantage of Japan, and utilize this for cooperation with the partner countries like Egypt, Nigeria, Bangladesh, India would be great. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, comparative advantage of Japan. Yes. What I will do is this now, because of time. Could we have people to ask specific questions to the speakers, Mr. Kano and Ambassador Abdelkarim? Can you do that, Mr. Takaito or Sagane-san? If so, you can speak now. Otherwise, we'll come back to it. Okay, Mr. Ito, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hasegawa, and thank you very much to all the speakers. My name is Taka Ito. I run the Triangular Partnership Program in the United Nations that Mr. Kano mentioned. I have two specific questions to Mr. Kano and one comment to Ambassador. And my two questions relate to Japan's current and future possible roles in international peace efforts. And as we all know, and as Mr. Kano mentioned, since 2017, I believe, there's no Japanese active troop deployment to any UN peacekeeping, although there's a very small number of staff members in UNMISS. And what we are seeing in our training is that many of the SDF trainers with actual UN peacekeeping are retiring. And so we are seeing less Japanese SDF troop trainers with actual peacekeeping experience. And my question is whether Japan could consider including some of the retirees, SDF retirees with actual UN peacekeeping experience in the training team. And another question relates to the possible defense equipment provision to other countries that Mr. Kano mentioned. As we all know, there are many TCCs who have the personnel to deploy, but they struggle with securing the necessary equipment to deploy. And my question is whether Japan can only provide equipment or can it be provided as a package? Specifically, not only equipment, but with personnel who can train on the use, operation, maintenance of the equipment, or maintenance personnel. Because what happens with simple donations is that the equipment break down and they become just garbage. So if there's not knowledge transfer that accompanies the equipment, I think the contributions is not as effective. And finally, my just to Ambassador Abdul Latif, I just wanted to mention that the triangular cooperation training that Mr. Kano mentioned between Japan, Indonesia, Kenya through TPP, we also work with many other countries like Uganda, Rwanda, Morocco, Vietnam, this year in Cambodia, and we're constantly looking for new partners to work on training capacity building of UN peacekeepers. So we would appreciate an opportunity to discuss with you separately on possible cooperation with Egypt. I'll stop here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, Sakane-san, can you just make it one point if you can,
okay,
because
thank you
of
very
time?
much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I make it quickly. Thank you very much for the presentation and discussion. I recognize and I feel about the very difficult situation in current global situation. Many conflict happens, and it is so difficult to solve. So it is a time how we could make it for the decisive action to reducing for the conflict. It is critically important right now. And currently in Africa, I'm now in working in Sudan, but currently in Africa, many competition coming up between United States, Russia, and China. It is making for so difficult to solve all issues. And for the, it is related with the action for the UN peacekeeping operations, consolidated action among the agreement within the UN Security Council. It is critically important, but due to the conflict struggle among partners, it is so difficult to make a decisive law. How we could clearly for the making consolidate peace, making peace is critically important. Referring to the comment from Professor Mizuno, I completely agree with how we could set a priority and how we could make a result of the peacekeeping operation. It is quite important in order to making for the accountability to taxpayer within Japan. It is very difficult, but however, we should make it a priority and setting for the improvement of the enforcement of the peace, making peace operations throughout the world. It must be very important, but this is just a comment, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. May I just then come back to Mr. Kano and Ambassador Abdul Latif. Ambassador Kano, if I can just summarize this question and I'll put to you. Can't Japan provide more equipment to the United Nations peace operations? Prime Minister Abe provided, I think, some big ship, no, to Coast Guard ship or something to the Philippines. is there any possibility for you or for the government to be more proactive in providing equipment in a packaged way? What is your advice on that?
Well, thank you, Mr. Hasegawa. And I think that that is one area that I'd like to explore in terms of enhancing more our contribution or support to the International Peace Corporation. You mentioned the example of the Philippines. Actually, I was involved in that issue in the last 10 years in Tokyo as well as in Manila. And that's also it's a part of the ODA financing the provision of the Coast Guard vessels, as well as land raiders, land-based raiders. It's a part of supporting the capacity building of the law enforcement capacity building. Likewise, I think my idea is that we could possibly consider supporting the capacity building in terms of the equipment for the organization which are engaged in the which could be deployed to the peacekeeping operations. There could be various ways. Maybe the UN could be one possible channel, but also we could do that bilaterally with the potential recipient countries as part of our bilateral security cooperation. That's exactly what I would like to emphasize. That, as I said, that Japan could consider collaborating with the global South countries. It's a kind of both ends and means, meaning that the support collaborating with the key global South countries in itself is an important for Japan's national interest, but also because many of those global South countries as big troop contributing countries. So collaborating together, we could jointly support the international peace corporations. Then I would like to answer the question raised by some of the participants that we could consider defense equipment, not just the equipment alone, but also could be a part of the package. Bilaterally, there are some examples, past examples that with the Philippines, when this is actually not a donation, but the procurement of the Philippine Air Force when they purchased the raiders and the air defense raiders. But we, Japanese government, in collaboration with the private sector, offer not just providing the raiders, but also we could some sort of service for the training of the people, and also when we provide the training aircraft to Philippine Air Force, we as a package some sort of a service to train the service staffs of the Philippines. So that could be possibly applied to the bilateral cooperation in the field of peacekeeping operations. And also, I got the question from on the whether we could use the retiring civil defense forces officials. Yeah, as I said, that we are no longer sending deploying the troops. So the people who have direct experience in the peacekeeping operations are retiring. So possibly, but also we have to sort out the more sort of a personal arrangement procedures. But as an idea, I think it's an idea worth pursuing.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Or Ambassador Abdel, what is your views now on this suggestion by Ambassador Yamamoto that Japan should take more initiatives, particularly in the peace building commissions, and you are engaged in conflict resolution as a part of your center, but can't Japan really do anything? What is your views and advice, please, Ambassador?
Yeah, thank you very much for all the very valuable comments that were made by distinguished speakers. First, there were comments made by Ambassador Shinyo that I think are very important on the emphasis on peacemaking and conflict resolution and preventive diplomacy and preventive deployments and also the role of preservation of culture and heritage. And I think all these are very valid and important points that I fully agree with. And I think with the new agenda of peace of the Secretary General and the Summit of the Future, these are very important suggestions to revisit there and to take forward, particularly on preventive deployments. And then also the welcome also the comment of Mr. Yamamoto on the Peace Building Commission. And I think indeed, Egypt is currently the vice chair of the Peace Building Commission. It was the chair last year. And I think there's a lot of scope of Japan and Egypt working together there in the Peace Building Commission. I was just actually reading before the meeting the statement by the Japanese ambassador to the UN in the Security Council in the debate on Thursday. And he was stressing a lot that there is a lot of scope to improve the way the Security Council, for example, takes on board the advice of the Peace Building Commission, and that the work of the Peace Building Commission contributes to the work of the Security Council. So I think there's a lot of scope for that to work together. And I think again on conflict resolution, Japan and Egypt have a lot of potential to work together on very specific initiatives in some areas of conflict around some particular issues that we can explore. And I think when we had this seminar in Red Sea, the future of Red Sea cooperation, we a bit discussed that. So I think that there's a lot that, and also to the comment that you made, that countries, by bringing their areas of expertise and strength and capacities together can achieve a lot together. But I think it's very important to identify the opportunity and the occasion to take forward that. And again, these seminars are very important to reflect on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm afraid that the time has passed. And so unless there is anyone last burning question anybody would like to ask?
Sorry, Professor Hasegawa, if I may.
Yes, please answer. Go ahead.
I forgot to a very. I also appreciate the comment from Mr. Taka on triangular cooperation, and look forward to engaging after the seminar on this, and also with Japan. And we think triangular cooperation is very important and useful model we believe in and we fully support.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you. Sorry.
much. Yes, I think we had a very good presentation and also discussions, and I think it moved into the one direction. That is Japan.
Mr. Kano has something to say, perhaps.
Yes, please. Yes, Mr. Kano.
Sorry, I just the last word. I just want to say that I appreciate various sort of suggestions, ideas made by people, participants, particularly Ambassador Shinyo and Ambassador Yamamoto. Sorry, I couldn't answer any of those points, but I do appreciate there's a couple of interesting ideas. And also the Ambassador Abdul Latif that you mentioned, the importance should be focused on the Africa. I can agree with you more, and also the climate change. Actually, I was the director in charge of the climate change 10 years ago. Congratulations to the COP27, but I did cover the COP17 in South Africa. So I think climate change as well as the population, Africa is one of the priority area. And in terms of the population, the last year global population surpassed the 88 billion. And then out of that, Africa is one of the big booms. According to the estimate, by mid-century, countries like DRC, Nigeria would overtake Pakistan or Indonesia, and Ethiopia also could overtake Bangladesh. So the big population as well as climate change could be an implication for the conflicts. So Africa, we should stay tuned on that. And because also that could have an impact on the Indo-Pacific and Japan's own security. So in that context, we would like to explore the partnership with regional leaders in Egypt. So I don't think that I can cover all the points made by the commentators, but I do appreciate the various valuable points made by those. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I think your presentation was also very, very comprehensive, covering all aspects of current and the possible future Japan's assistance. And I think in the future assistance or cooperation that Japan can make, I think you all are quite right that the partnership is a key to advancing the cause for the peaceful world. And I think Japan is doing the right thing in the right direction. I think Japan has not been able to provide any significant assistance, sort of military kind of assistance to the Ukraine. But I think Japan is not really expected to do so. I think there's no major complaint against Japan. So I think expectation is for Japan to be more cooperative and engaged in strengthening, as Ambassador Abdel Latif said, institutional capacity of the African and other Asian, Middle Eastern countries to cope with their own conflict. And I think that's a key. And I think that's something Japan can do. And I would like to come back to what Mr. Akashi said at his opening remark, that I think maybe Japan should think more what we can do to enable the United Nations to be more effective. I think this is one area I hope that Director General Kano, that as a central coordinating body of Japan's assistance, if you could sort of keep that in mind, that the United Nations should not be forgotten, that not everything should be done by the major powers. And so please, our appeal is not to forget the United Nations, and let's use it and let's contribute to the global peace in Africa and the other areas. So with that note, thank you so much for everybody for contributing. And I think Mr. Akashi, would you like to say just one word at the end?
No comment, but yeah, I listened to all the speakers with great attention, and I think these ideas should be kept and considered together. It was very useful discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Then if I may reiterate what Professor Kumagai said, for those who are brave enough to speak out, could you just make your summary of your contributions, and we can reflect that in the summary report of this meeting, and it will be posted on the website of GPAJ, KPC, and the ACUN's Tokyo office. So thank you so much for your contribution, Professor Kumagai.
Thank you very much, Hasegawa. Now, lastly, I'd like to make a very quick announcement of the upcoming event. Here we are. Now I'm sharing this with you. We have seminar on February 10th, Friday, 8 p.m. Japan time. We have a speech by Ambassador Noguchi Motoo. He is attorney at Iwata Godo, and he was former United Nations International Judge at Cambodia Khmer Rouge trials. Yes, the title of his speech is Lessons Learned from the Completion of the Cambodia Khmer Rouge Trials. And we have a Master of Ceremony by Ikeda Akiko, and we have a commentator, Mr. Anis Ahmed. Mr. Anis Ahmed, he is Principal Rule of Law Officer with the United Nations investigation team to promote accountability for the crimes committed by ISIL. I hope that many of you can join us. Thank you very much.